それが俺の夢の果てだ。
Shōnen has an obsession with ambition. This was a thought that appeared in my head while watching Thomas Flight's video on the concept of ambition in cinema. He presents that American cinema typically portrays ambition through a specific lens, and how the Japanese film Perfect Days attempts to offer a different approach to portraying the concept of ambition rarely seen in American cinema.
Whether we're celebrating positive ambition or warning against its potential dangers and pitfalls, the presumption seems to almost always be that the protagonist will be ambitious. What would it look like if we told the story of a life not defined by the relentless pursuit of ambition?
This got me thinking about the relationship between ambition and shōnen, where the two are much more intrinsically intertwined, where characters chasing power, dreams, and purpose are often the core of the narrative. Which led me to ask the question, is it possible to tell a shōnen story that isn't centered around the pursuit of ambition?
この俺はいずれおかげの名を受け継いで、でよ、先代のどのおかげをも超えてやるんだ。
When we think about shōnen, male-centric Japanese manga/anime, one of the first things that comes to mind is the goal. These stories orbit around a central ambition, something the protagonist strives towards that fuels the narrative and justifies their growth. These ambitions take many shapes and carry varying degrees of importance to the plot, but they are often inherent to all shōnen narratives as they provide forward momentum for both the events and character growth. The obvious examples are abundant. Naruto wanting to become Hokage or to save his best friend, Luffy striving to be the pirate king and one day find the One Piece, Asta pushing past his limits to become one of the greatest wizards in existence. But ambition in shōnen isn't always loud or dramatic. Take Komi-san can't communicate, not what most people think when it comes to shōnen or ambition-driven narratives, but yet it's both. While the story follows the budding relationship between Komi and Tadano, it's also driven by Komi's ambition to make 100 friends. This goal shapes and propels the story forward. Even supposedly non-ambitious characters like Ichigo and Denji fit this mold. I'll end up talking about Ichigo more later, but Denji is often mislabeled as an anti-shonen protagonist who subverts the traditional ambition-based narrative simply because of Chainsaw Man's tragic and abrasive storytelling style. While Chainsaw Man does offer a unique take on ambition, perhaps even critiquing it, it's still fundamentally about a character striving for something greater than himself and what it means to achieve it. I don't mean this as a criticism. As someone who's naturally drawn to stories about ambitious people pursuing meaningful goals, I understand their appeal. These characters often serve as mirrors reflecting our own desires for something more and our search for inner resolve to achieve our dreams. Myself included, I made a whole video discussing how the concept of ambition has affected my life and why I personally relate to ambitious characters. Look at the rising popularity of series like Blue Lock, which embodies the thrill of pursuing ambition above all else. While these stories can be both encouraging and cautionary, watching Thomas Flight's video left me wondering, had I seen my Perfect Days? Could a shōnen be compelling without using ambition as its driving force? Could it offer something different? That's when I remembered Ruri Dragon.
あ、なにこれ？角が生えていた？
I've always felt there was something special about Ruri Dragon, though I couldn't quite identify what made it so unique. It's a simple, warm tale about a girl whose life is turned upside down when she suddenly develops dragon attributes. Upon learning that her estranged father is actually a dragon, Rui discovers she has reached the age where her hybrid genes are beginning to manifest. She must learn to control these abilities while balancing school life and social interactions. The story is full of life and personality. The characters are fun and easygoing, the atmosphere is gentle, and the plot progresses without any forced urgency. It unfolds naturally, and while this isn't the kind of story that would usually draw me in, There was something about it that resonated deeply, and I couldn't put my finger on why. But with this new perspective, I think I've finally been able to find the reason for that. You might expect such a story to follow familiar tropes, an unusual kid trying to hide their powers, or struggling to balance a superpowered identity with a normal life. Instead, Ruri Dragon tackles these circumstances head on, pun intended, by placing Ruri in a situation where concealment is impossible. Once these changes occur, everyone knows, and there's no going back. Typically, this setup would lead to the protagonist either using their powers for a greater purpose or embracing their new abilities as an opportunity, but not Ruri. Her natural response is to reject these circumstances and minimize using her powers, viewing them not as a gift, but as an obstacle to overcome. She's not interested in learning how to control her fire breathing to fight evil or protect the weak or even reach a goal. For Rui, it's more about learning how not to burn someone at school again. This rejection of using her situation as an opportunity was my breakthrough moment. You take a situation that would normally lead a character down one way and then ask yourself if you could create a character who would naturally go down the opposite direction. To illustrate this point, consider Ichigo Kurosaki, a character often distinguished from his peers for his perceived lack of ambition. Because he doesn't voice loud, explicit goals like his counterparts in the Big Three, he often is excluded from discussions about ambitious characters. But I believe this is a mischaracterization. While Ichigo may not present with textbook ambition, he deeply craves purpose and needs to excel in whatever role he plays, which his Soul Reaper occupation grants him. The Fullbringer arc, though not widely celebrated in Bleach's run, offers an excellent case study in Ichigo's character. Stripped of his Soul Reaper abilities, he feels purposeless and disconnected. He misses Rukia and his fellow Soul Reapers, feels left out when his friends use their abilities without him, and struggles with his inability to help others, which ultimately leads him to Ginjo and his secret group. This yearning for purpose, this need to be needed, is profoundly human. His desire to protect others defines him. It may seem modest compared to other characters we've spoken about in the past, but the lengths he will go to fulfill it is what drives the story of Bleach forward. Ruri stands in direct contrast, lacking such yearning. She's someone who would prefer to blend into the background, content with a quiet life alongside her close friend and mother. Instead, she's given powers and attributes that force her into the spotlight. This setup allows the story to explore something different yet deeply human. The challenge of relating to the world when circumstances beyond your control set you apart. Rui's approach to this challenge and how the world responds to her experience is what makes the story truly shine. Power sprouting randomly in the most inconvenient of times, and setting the stage for Rui to learn about dealing with others, overcoming negativity, or even learning more about herself as a person. Ruri Dragon is in essence anti-shonen in its portrayal of a character who isn't trying to reach for the stars, but is struggling to find a way to keep her feet firmly planted on the ground. Ruri Dragon thrives in the mundane. The relaxing, natural vibe of its tone and naturalistic dialogue offers a detour from the usual over-the-top and dramatized framing we've come to know from Shōnen. The characters talk to each other like real people, behaving as you'd expect actual high school students would. While not completely devoid of quirks, the story feels grounded and doesn't resort to exaggerated antics to convey character personalities. In an interview with Manga Plus to celebrate their 6th anniversary of the platform, Masaoki Shindo, the mangaka of Ruri Dragon, spoke about his approach to naturalistic storytelling. He emphasized that maintaining the character's natural state was crucial, even at the cost of plot or direction. These conversations between characters have meaning. In his eyes, his role is to capture those moments of their lives as if they were real people in this world. This approach allows his story to feel both familiar and refreshing. The characters breathe and move through the narrative effortlessly, revealing who they are through small interactions. Take Rui's mom, who acts like any single parent would, serving as Rui's main support by creating environments for her to feel relaxed, to learn, to express herself while juggling her own work responsibilities. Rui's classmates each have distinct opinions about her situation while dealing with their own individual issues, which surface in unexpected yet believable ways. Some kids are excited about the opportunity to know someone with dragon powers. Some kids are understandably scared. Some kids are just curious. Through deep conversations about how they feel, arguments over conflicting ideologies, beliefs, personality types, or just simply hanging out to work through problems, allows these characters to feel unbelievably real. Shindo's commitment to making these characters so expressive and true to themselves is very unique. There's just something about it I can't get enough of. But you might be wondering how Ruri Dragon could maintain a level of interest when the writing style is so lackadaisical. How do you create tension and moments for character growth when a good majority of the runtime is Ruri dealing with new attributes or talking to classmates? As I mentioned in a previous video about the promising Jump series currently on the platform, one of Ruri Dragon's major strengths is how it creates interesting narrative events that consistently connect to Ruri's abilities and their impact on her life. Every major character-defining scene can be traced back to Ruri gaining a new power, a level of cohesiveness I find impressive. Chapter 4, and then again in chapters 12 through 14, show Ruri confronting moments of character growth that come directly from her powers manifesting, which end up offering her an opportunity to gain a new friend and confidant. It's a deceptive pattern, but one that deepens her arc as the story moves forward, and Shindo always finds a new way to implement it to keep the story fresh. And this trend continues into the newer chapters as well. I was talking about this recently with a good friend of mine and fellow AniTuber Mike Ubi. He pointed out one of his favorite examples, chapters 19 through 21, where Ruri has to navigate two classmates talking behind her back. It's typical teen drama with an added touch of fantasy, but it cuts into the culture of high school gossip, the weight of preconceived notions, and the difficulty of getting someone to see the real you. Maeda's plan for Ruri here is pretty drastic for a couple of high school kids, but it works. It gives Ruri an excuse, and maybe even a push, to be more confrontational, to stand up for herself in a way that feels both earned and carries into future encounters. Why I find it so fascinating is because Ruri is such a reactive character. Unlike characters such as Luffy or Goku who actively create story beats, Ruri consistently faces situations she'd rather avoid. But doing so allows her to see things in ways she never considered before the emergence of her dragon traits. In that same interview from earlier, Shindo revealed that Ruri Dragon stemmed from personal experience, his own uncomfortable feeling of being different from others, only to discover that people viewed these differences much more positively than he did. How often do we criticize ourselves for things we wish were different? How often we try to change and match other people's perceived expectations, only to find out that the people we love actually view us in a much brighter light than we could ever see in ourselves. I know that's something I struggle with on a constant basis, and clearly so does Ruri. But through honest expressions of her feelings, stepping out of her comfort zone, and learning to rely on others while dealing with these changes, Ruri discovers beauty and joy within her circumstances. It's not always perfect, and neither is she. Ruri is honest, but she can also be abrasive and a little short-sighted. She's kind, yet she can be overindulgent and quick to avoid what makes her uncomfortable. This new life she's living isn't going to be easy. Sometimes hiding away may seem like the simpler option, and that thought has definitely crossed her mind more than once, especially as things start to escalate in her maturation. But Ruri is stronger than she realizes, and more importantly, she has people who remind her of that and stand by her as she learns to face it all. This is where Ruri Dragon's approach intersects with traditional ambition-based storytelling. Without needing a higher purpose for self-worth, Ruri finds value in being herself and forming unexpected connections with others. It's mundane, it's normal, but it's profound. This soft story about a girl dealing with dragon powers and trying to continue her school life is so relatable, warm, and honest that those moments of kindness, moments of breakthrough, moments of brevity, all I could ever do when reading it is allow a big smile to form on my face. This adventure may not be grand, but it sure is fun. I know by now some of you may be thinking Shōnen fanboy discovers slice of life, which to a certain extent is fair. Even though I've read plenty of romance and slice of life stories in the past, I'm currently getting through Apothecary Diaries and Smoking Behind the Supermarket with You. I've always been more drawn to action and adventure-based narratives, and that preference probably shaped my initial reaction to Ruri Dragon's quiet, meandering writing style. But I would challenge that notion and emphasize what makes Ruri Dragon feel so special. I think this story finds a footing that most slice of life titles don't. It's not just about everyday life, it's an honest conversation about what it means to be someone adverse to change and conflict, suddenly thrust into a life that demands both. It doesn't frame that discomfort as a dramatic struggle, but as something subtle and deeply human. It places these events in a context that feels like I'm there going along this journey with her in a naturalistic setting, making you wonder what it would be like to go to school one day and find that one of your classmates has horns growing out of their head. Or maybe you're the one who wakes up with the horns instead. There are stakes, there is drama, there is tension, but it feels real. And in doing so, it becomes hopeful. It gently reminds us that while trying new things, making friends, or even just telling someone how you feel can be scary, it might still be worth it in the end. That's not to say that Ruri Dragon is objectively the better type of story to tell when it comes to shonen. Whether or not you're telling a story about a triumphant hero, or the cautionary tale of where ambition and revenge could lead you, or a quiet narrative about finding peace within your own skin, each of those are worth telling, and Ruri Dragon is definitely worth reading.